Would you die for a kiss? Would you trade every tomorrow for one perfect moment with the person you love? In the summer of 1882, in the dusty town of Redemption Creek, Arizona, a gunslinger named Jake "Blackjack" Morrison faced that exact choice. And what he chose that day would become the most legendary love story the Wild West ever witnessed. They say love makes fools of us all. But in the lawless territories where death came as quick as lightning and twice as merciless, love didn't just make you foolish. It made you dead. Jake Morrison knew this better than most. With 43 notches on his gun and a $5,000 bounty on his head, he'd survived by 3 simple rules. Never trust anyone, never stay in one place too long, and never ever let anyone get close enough to matter. For 7 years, those rules kept him alive. They kept him moving through the territories like a ghost, leaving nothing behind but empty whiskey bottles and fresh graves. He was the fastest draw west of the Mississippi, a man who could put 6 bullets through a playing card before it hit the ground. Cowboys spoke his name in whispers. Mothers used it to frighten children into obedience. Even other outlaws gave him a wide berth, knowing that Blackjack Morrison had traded his soul for speed and his heart for survival. But rules, like hearts, were made to be broken. And on that sweltering June morning, when he rode into Redemption Creek with dust in his throat and blood on his hands, Jake Morrison had no idea he was about to break all 3 of his rules for a woman named Isabella Rose. Redemption Creek wasn't supposed to be anything special, just another frontier town with delusions of respectability, another place to water his horse, resupply, and disappear before anyone recognized the scar across his jaw or the cold death in his steel-gray eyes. The town sat in a valley between 2 mountain ranges, isolated enough that news traveled slow and justice traveled slower. Perfect for a man who needed to lay low after that unfortunate incident with the marshal in Tucson. The main street stretched barely 200 yards, lined with the usual collection of false-fronted buildings, trying to look more impressive than they were. Hartley's General Store, the Broken Wheel Saloon, May's boarding house with its peeling yellow paint, the sheriff's office with its barred windows and fresh wanted posters. Jake counted 7 posters nailed to the wall as he rode past. His was 3rd from the left, though the artist had been generous with his hairline and stingy with his scars. He tied his horse outside the saloon, a black stallion named Lucifer, who'd carried him through more gunfights than he could count. The animal was mean as a rattlesnake and twice as dangerous, which made them perfect partners. Jake pushed through the batwing doors, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness inside. The place was nearly empty at this hour. Just a few miners nursing whiskeys at the bar and a poker game in the corner that looked like it had been going all night. That's when he saw her. She stood behind the bar, wiping down glasses with a practiced efficiency that couldn't hide the grace in her movements. Auburn hair pinned up to reveal a neck like carved ivory. Green eyes that seemed to hold all the forests he'd never taken time to appreciate. She wore a simple blue dress, modest by saloon standards, but the way she moved in it made Jake's mouth go dry in a way that had nothing to do with trail dust. Their eyes met across the smoky room, and something shifted in Jake's chest, something he'd thought dead and buried in a grave outside Amarillo 7 years ago, something that felt dangerously like hope. Isabella Rose had been tending bar at the Broken Wheel for 6 months, ever since her husband died and left her with nothing but debts and a reputation as another unfortunate widow. She'd seen plenty of dangerous men walk through those doors, men with blood on their hands and murder in their hearts. She could spot them from across the room by the way they checked exits, the way they sat with their backs to walls, the way their hands never strayed far from their guns. This one was different. Oh, he was dangerous, all right. Maybe the most dangerous man she'd ever seen. It was in the controlled violence of his movements, the coiled spring tension in his shoulders. the way other men unconsciously moved away from him like cattle sensing. A wolf, but when their eyes met, she saw something else. A loneliness so deep it made her chest ache. A weariness that had nothing to do with miles traveled and everything to do with the weight of surviving when everyone around you didn't. She knew she should look away, should serve him his whiskey and forget he existed. Men like him brought nothing but trouble, and she'd had enough trouble for one lifetime. But instead she found herself walking toward him, drawn by something she couldn't name and wouldn't understand until it was too late. Jake ordered whiskey. She poured it without speaking, but her eyes asked questions her lips wouldn't form. Who are you running from? What are you running to? How many graves follow in your wake? He drank in silence, but his eyes answered. Everyone. Nothing. Too many to count. They might have gone on like that forever. Two souls recognizing something broken in each other, but too scarred to reach out. But fate, that cruel mistress with a sense of humor dark as midnight, had other plans. The doors burst open, bringing blazing sunlight and cold death into the saloon. Three men stood silhouetted against the noon sun, and Jake didn't need to see their faces to know who they were. The Colton brothers, bounty hunters out of Texas, with a reputation for bringing their quarry back draped over a saddle rather than sitting in it. The eldest, Samuel, spoke first. His voice carried the lazy confidence of a man who'd never met a situation he couldn't solve with violence. Well, Black Jack Morrison, you're a hard man to find." Jake didn't turn around, just finished his whiskey in one smooth motion and set the glass down gentle as a kiss. "Not hard enough, apparently. That's a lot of money on your head, Morrison. $5,000 buys a lot of future for a man, or a lot of bullets. Your choice." Isabella watched the exchange with her heart climbing into her throat. She'd seen enough gunfights to know how this would end. The Colton brothers were good, but the man at her bar radiated death like heat from a forge. They were about to turn her saloon into a slaughterhouse. That's when she made the decision that would change everything. A choice born of impulse and something deeper, something that recognized a kindred spirit in this dangerous stranger. She reached under the bar, where she kept the shotgun for trouble just like this, but instead of pointing it at anyone, she fired it into the ceiling. The blast shook the rafters and rained dust down on everyone. In the confusion that followed, as everyone ducked and cursed and tried to figure out what was happening, she grabbed Jake's hand. Back door. Now! He should have pulled away, should have handled his own problems his own way. But her hand was warm in his, and it had been so long since anyone had touched him with anything other than violence that he found himself following her through the chaos, out the back door and into an alley that smelled of horse manure and broken dreams. Why? It was all he could manage as she pulled him through a maze of back streets she knew by heart. "Because you looked like you needed saving. I don't need anyone's help." "No? Then why are you still holding my hand?" He looked down, surprised to find she was right. Their fingers were intertwined, like they'd been designed to fit together. He should have let go. Instead, he held tighter. She led him to an abandoned miner's shack on the edge of town, half collapsed and forgotten by everyone except her. She'd discovered it months ago, a place to go when the weight of widowhood and whiskey-breathed men got too heavy to bear. Now it became their sanctuary. "They'll find me," Jake said, checking his guns with practiced efficiency. "They always do. Not today. The Coltons are good trackers, but they're also predictable. They'll check the obvious places first. Hotels, boarding houses, the stables. By the time they think to look here, you'll be long gone. And you? I'll go back to the saloon, play the shocked barmaid who has no idea where the dangerous outlaw disappeared to. They won't believe you. They don't have to. They just have to not be able to prove otherwise." Jake studied her face in the dim light filtering through the broken roof. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with an honesty that surprised them both. "My husband was a good man, steady, reliable, safe. He never raised his voice or his hand to me, gave me everything a woman should want, and for 3 years I died a little more each day, suffocating under the weight of that safety. When he passed, I mourned him properly, wore black for the appropriate time, said all the right words. But late at night, when no one was watching, I celebrated my freedom. She met his eyes, green fire burning with suppressed passion. I've spent my whole life being what others expected, the dutiful daughter, the proper wife, the respectable widow. But when I looked at you in that saloon, I saw someone who'd given up trying to be anything other than what they are. And I thought maybe, for just one day, I could be that free too. Jake had faced down dozens of men in gunfights. He'd been shot, stabbed, beaten, and left for dead more times than he could count. But nothing had ever scared him as much as the feeling blooming in his chest as he looked at this remarkable woman. I'm not a good man, Isabella. I've done things that would make you run screaming if you knew. I'm not asking you to be good. I'm asking you to be real. He kissed her then, because what else could he do? She'd offered him something he'd never thought to find again, not redemption. He was too far gone for that. But connection, understanding, a moment of genuine human warmth in a life that had become nothing but cold survival. The kiss tasted of whiskey and possibilities, of danger and desire. It was desperate and gentle at once, two drowning souls finding air in each other. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, staring at each other like they'd discovered fire. I have to leave tonight, Jake said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. The Coltons won't give up, and there'll be others after them. There always are. I know. Come with me. The words surprised him as much as her. He'd been alone. So long he'd forgotten what it felt like to want company. But standing there in that broken-down shack with dust motes dancing around them like tiny angels, he couldn't imagine riding away without her. Isabella's heart soared and shattered simultaneously. Jake, I can't. This is my home. It's not much, but it's mine. And you're a wanted man. That life, always running, always looking over your shoulder, it would kill me faster than staying here ever could. He wanted to argue, to convince her that life on the run was better than no life at all. But he knew she was right. He'd chosen this existence, or rather, it had chosen him. He had no right to drag her into it. Then we have today, he said. Yes, today. They spent the afternoon in that shack, talking like they'd known each other forever. She told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a banker who'd lost everything in bad investments. How she'd come west as a mail-order bride, seeking adventure and finding only disappointment. He told her about the boy he'd been before the war, full of dreams about seeing the ocean. How those dreams had died alongside his brothers at Antietam, leaving only a hollow man who was good at one thing, dealing death. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, they both knew their time was running short. The Coltons would have searched the town by now. They'd be expanding their search, getting desperate and dangerous. I should go back, Isabella said, though she made no move to leave his arms. If I'm missing too long, people will talk. Let them talk. Easy for you to say, you'll be gone tomorrow, I have to live here. The truth of it stung, but Jake couldn't argue. This was the fundamental difference between them. He was a ghost, existing outside society's rules because he'd already broken all of them. She was still part of the world, still had a chance at a real life if she could find it. They walked back toward town as shadows lengthened across the desert. At the edge of Main Street, hidden in an alley between the feed store and the blacksmith, they stopped. This was as far as they could go together. Thank you, Jake said, the words inadequate for what he felt. For today, for everything. Isabella reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar along his jaw. Be careful, Jake Morrison. The world's got enough ghosts already. He caught her hand, pressed it against his cheek. Will you do something for me? Anything. Be happy. Find someone who can give you what I can't. Live the life you deserve. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. And what about you? What will you do? What I always do. Survive. They stood there, neither wanting to be the first. To walk away, both knowing they had to. The moment stretched between them like a rope pulled taut, ready to snap. That's when they heard the gunshot. It came from the saloon, followed by shouting and the crash of breaking furniture. Jake's hand went to his gun instinctively, his whole body shifting into the predator stance Isabella had noticed that morning. "The Coltons," he said. "They must think someone in there knows where you are." More gunshots. A woman's scream. The sound of someone begging. Jake took a step toward the saloon, then stopped. This wasn't his fight. Getting involved would only confirm he was still in town, put everyone in more danger. The smart play was to slip away while the Coltons were distracted, use the chaos as cover for his escape. But then he heard Samuel Colton's voice, loud and clear. "I know you're out there, Morrison. You've got 1 minute to show yourself, or we start shooting people until someone tells us where you're hiding." Isabella grabbed his arm. "Jake, no, you can't. They'll kill you. They'll kill innocent people if I don't. Since when do you care? About innocent people?" He looked at her and she saw the answer in his eyes. "Since you made me remember I'm still human." "Get somewhere safe," he said, checking his guns one last time. "This is going to get ugly." "Jake, please." He kissed her, hard and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into that one perfect moment. Then he was gone, walking down Main Street toward the saloon with the setting sun at his back, his shadow stretching out before him like a dark omen. The street cleared as if by magic. Doors slammed shut. Windows were shuttered. In seconds, Main Street became a ghost town, everyone hiding from the storm about to break. Jake stopped 50 feet from the saloon. "Colton, I'm here. Let them go." The doors swung open and Samuel Colton emerged, dragging May from the boarding house by her gray hair. The elderly woman whimpered, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "There he is," Samuel said with a smile that belonged on a rattlesnake. "The famous Blackjack Morrison. You know, I was starting to think you'd gone soft, hiding behind a woman's skirts." His brothers, Thomas and Will, came out behind him, guns drawn. They spread out, creating a triangle of death with Jake at its center. "Let her go," Jake said, his voice carrying the quiet menace of thunder before lightning strikes. "Your beef is with me." "Oh, we'll let her go. After." "See, you've led us on quite a chase, Morrison. Cost us time, money, and patience. I think we deserve a little entertainment for our troubles. What do you want? A fair fight. You against all three of us. You win, you walk away free. We win, well, we collect that bounty." Jake laughed, a sound dry as desert bones. 3 against 1? That's your idea of fair? For the great Blackjack Morrison? I figure it's almost even odds." Jake considered his options. He could try to take them now, but May was in the line of fire. Innocent blood on his hands was a line he'd never crossed, and he wasn't about to start now. "Fine." But she walks away. First, Samuel shoved May toward the boarding house. The old woman stumbled but kept her feet, disappearing inside without a backward glance. Smart woman. The 4 men stood in the dying light, hands hovering over their guns, death hanging in the air like smoke. Jake had been in this position dozens of times, but never against 3 men, never with odds this bad. He'd need to be perfect. No mistakes, no hesitation, no mercy. From her hiding spot in the alley, Isabella watched with her heart in her throat. She'd seen Jake move, seen the deadly grace in him, but the Coltons were killers too. The math was simple and terrible. 3 guns against 1, 3 chances to die against 1 chance to live. She couldn't let it happen, wouldn't let it happen. Moving quietly as a shadow, she slipped through the back streets to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Durant was a good man, if not a brave one. He'd stayed out of the Coltons' way, but maybe, just maybe, she could convince him to act. She found him hiding behind his desk, sweating through his shirt despite the evening cool. "Sheriff, you have to stop this." "Are you crazy, woman?" "That's Blackjack Morrison out there, and the Coltons. I go out there, I'm dead. You're the law. The law don't mean much to dead men." Isabella realized she was wasting her time. Durant wasn't going to help. No one was. Jake would face this alone, the way he'd faced everything else in his life. Unless... She ran back to the saloon, slipping through the back door she'd escaped through with Jake just hours before. The shotgun was still behind the bar where she'd left it. She loaded it with steady hands, though her heart was racing like a runaway horse. Outside, the standoff continued. The sun had nearly set now, painting everything in shades of blood and shadow. Jake stood perfectly still, reading the micro-movements of the men facing him. Samuel would draw first. He was the leader, the one with something to prove. Thomas would go for a heart shot. Will for the head. 3 different targets, 3 different speeds, 3 different kinds of death. But Jake had something they didn't. He had nothing left to lose. No, that wasn't true anymore. For the first time in 7 years, he had something worth living for. The memory of Isabella's kiss, the warmth of her hand in his, the possibility of something better than this endless dance with death. It should have made him slower, more cautious. Instead, it made him faster. "Any last words, Morrison?" Samuel called out, his hand twitching toward his gun. Jake smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. Yeah, her name was Isabella Rose, and she was worth it. Samuel's face twisted in confusion, but his hand was already moving. The world exploded into motion and thunder. Jake's guns appeared in his hands as if by magic, roaring their deadly song. His first shot caught Samuel in the chest, spinning him around like a rag doll. The second took Thomas in the shoulder, sending his shot wide. But Will was faster than expected, his gun clearing leather and swinging toward Jake's heart. Time slowed to a crawl. Jake saw the muzzle flash, felt the bullet coming for him, knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't avoid it. This was how it ended. Not in some nameless town, but here, in Redemption Creek, fighting for something. That mattered. The shotgun blast came from behind Will, catching him in the back and sending him sprawling. Isabella stood in the saloon doorway, smoke rising from the barrel, her face set in grim determination. But Thomas wasn't done. Wounded, bleeding, he raised his gun with his good arm, aiming not at Jake, but at Isabella. Jake saw it happening, saw the angle, saw death coming for the only good thing in his miserable life. He moved without thinking, throwing himself between Isabella and the gun just as Thomas fired. The bullet hit Jake in the chest, punching through his left lung and sending him staggering. But even falling, even dying, he was still Blackjack Morrison. His gun spoke one more time, and Thomas Colton fell with a neat hole between his eyes. Jake hit the ground hard, blood already pooling beneath him. The gun fell from nerveless fingers as Isabella rushed to his side, cradling his head in her lap. "No, no, no," she whispered, pressing her hands against the wound, trying to hold his life inside him. "Jake, stay with me." He looked up at her, memorizing every line of her face. "Worth it," he managed, blood bubbling on his lips. "You were worth it. Don't talk. Help is coming. You're going to be fine." They both knew it was a lie. The wound was too bad, the blood flowing too fast. Jake had seen enough men die to know what it looked like, felt like. The cold creeping in from his extremities, the way the world seemed to be getting darker around the edges. "Isabella," he whispered, reaching up to touch her face one last time. "That kiss. Best thing I ever did. Jake, please, don't leave me." "Not leaving. Just going ahead. Maybe I'll see you again. Somewhere better than this." She kissed him then, soft and desperate, tasting blood and goodbye. When she pulled back, his eyes were still open, but the light in then was gone. Blackjack Morrison died as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, held by the only person who'd ever seen him as more than a killer. He died not as an outlaw, but as a man who'd remembered what it meant to love. Isabella held him as the town slowly came back to life around them. People emerged from their hiding places, gathering in a circle around the woman and the dead gunslinger. Sheriff Durant finally appeared, looking sheepish and relieved. Doc Hartley knelt beside them, checking for a pulse they all knew he wouldn't find. "He saved us," May said quietly, her voice carrying in the still evening air. "That outlaw saved." "That's all." Isabella looked up, tears streaming down her face. He wasn't just an outlaw. His name was Jake Morrison, and he was the bravest man I ever knew. She stood slowly, still looking down at Jake's still form. Someone had closed his eyes, and in death, his face looked peaceful in a way it never had in life. The hard lines were softer now. The constant vigilance finally relaxed. "What'll you do now?" May asked gently. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with quiet certainty. "I'm going to bury him, give him the funeral he deserves, and then I'm going to live, really live, the way he wanted me to." They buried Jake Morrison 3 days later, not in Boot Hill with the other outlaws and forgotten souls, but in the regular cemetery, under a cottonwood tree that would give him shade. Isabella paid for the headstone herself, using the reward money the town had collected for her after she'd saved them from the Coltons. The inscription was simple: Jake Morrison, he died for love. The funeral was small. Just Isabella, May, and, surprisingly, Sheriff Durant, who'd found some courage in the aftermath. As they lowered the pine casket into the ground, Isabella dropped a single red rose on top. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me what it means to be brave." Life in Redemption Creek went on. The saloon reopened, though Isabella didn't return to work there. She used the rest of the reward money to open a small school, teaching the town's children to read and write. It wasn't the adventure she'd once dreamed of, but it was a life with purpose, with meaning. She never remarried, though, not for lack of suitors. Men came calling, drawn by her beauty and the mysterious sadness in her eyes. But none of them could measure up to the memory of a scarred gunslinger who'd given everything for one perfect day. Years passed. The town grew. The railroad came through, bringing civilization and all its complications. The Wild West slowly became just the West, and the days of outlaws and gunfighters faded into legend, but Isabella never forgot. Every year, on the anniversary of that day, she would visit Jake's grave. She'd bring a bottle of good whiskey and 2 glasses, and she'd sit there as the sun set, telling him about her year, about the children she'd taught, the lives she'd touched, the happiness she'd found in small moments. "You told me to be happy," she would say. "I'm trying, Jake. I'm trying." She lived to be 93, one of the last people alive who remembered the old days, the wild days, when men lived and died by the gun. Writers and historians would come to interview her, wanting to know about the famous gunfight, about Black, Jack Morrison's last stand, but she never told them the whole truth. Never told them about the afternoon in the shack, about the kiss that tasted of forever, about the way he'd smiled just before Samuel Colton drew. Some stories were too precious to share with the world. On her deathbed, surrounded by grandchildren she'd helped raise, though they weren't her own, she spoke her last words: "I'm coming, Jake." They buried her beside him under the cottonwood tree that had grown tall and strong over the decades. The headstone read, "Isabella Rose, she lived for love." Some say if you visit that cemetery at sunset, when the light is just right and the wind whispers through the cottonwood leaves, you can see them, 2 figures hand in hand walking into the sunset that never ends. Together at last, free at last, in a place where wanted posters don't matter and love is the only law. The story of Jake Morrison and Isabella Rose became legend in redemption. Creek. Parents told it to their children as proof that love could bloom anywhere, even in the harshest ground. Young couples met under the cottonwood tree, making promises they hoped to keep. And every sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, as if the universe itself remembered that one perfect day when an outlaw chose love over life. But legends, like love, have a way of spreading beyond their borders. Cowboys carried the tale from camp to camp, each telling adding new details, new drama. Some said Jake had killed 100 men before that day. Others claimed Isabella had been a famous singer from San Francisco, hiding from her own dark past. The facts got mixed with fiction until no one could say for sure what was true, except for one thing. Everyone agreed on one thing. He died for her kiss, and it was worth it. There's a saying in the Old West, "Death comes for us all. It's what we do before it arrives that matters." Jake Morrison spent most of his life running from death, dealing it out to others, living as if tomorrow would never come. But in his last 24 hours, he learned what it meant to truly live, not in the shadow of death, but in the light of love. Isabella Rose spent her life after Jake, living for both of them. Every kindness she showed, every child she taught, every sunset she watched, she did it with the memory of his sacrifice burning in her heart like an eternal flame. She proved that love doesn't end with death. It transforms, becomes something larger, something that touches every life around it. Their story reminds us that love isn't always about happy endings. Sometimes it's about perfect moments. Sometimes it's about choosing to be brave when being safe would be easier. Sometimes it's about recognizing that certain chances only come once, and if we don't take them, we'll regret it for whatever time we have left. In our modern world, we don't face gunfights at high noon or bounty hunters on our trail, but we face our own battles, our own moments when we must choose between safety and passion, between existing and living. We all have our own Isabella or Jake out there, someone who makes us want to be better than we are, someone worth taking the risk for. The question is, when that moment comes, when love stands before us with all its danger and possibility, will we be brave enough to choose it? Will we take the chance, knowing it might end in heartbreak? Will we dare to live like Jake and Isabella, with hearts wide open despite the cost? These are the questions their story asks us more than a century later. These are the choices that make us human, that separate life from mere survival, and perhaps that's why we still tell stories like this. Not because we want to glamorize the violence of the Old West, but because we need to remember that love has always been the most powerful force in human history. Empires rise and fall, outlaws come and go, but love endures. It writes itself into our bones, our stories, our legends. Jake Morrison died for a kiss, but in dying he found immortality, not the kind promised by preachers or poets, but the kind that lives in every heart that chooses love over fear. Isabella Rose lived for love, and in living, she proved that one person can carry enough love for two. Their graves are still there in Redemption Creek, though the town itself has changed beyond recognition. The saloon is now a coffee shop. The sheriff's office is a real estate agency. But the cemetery remains, and the cottonwood tree still stands, and every sunset still paints the sky in memory of that own perfect day. Visitors leave roses on their graves sometimes, red ones for passion, white ones for purity, yellow ones for friendship that became something more. But the most common offering is simpler: 2 whiskey glasses and a bottle of bourbon, left by couples who understand that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that break your heart. As for the kiss itself, that kiss that cost a man his life and gave a woman her purpose, what can we say about it? How do we measure the value of a single moment against an entire lifetime? Jake would tell you it was the easiest trade he ever made. Isabella would tell you it was both her greatest joy and her deepest sorrow. But perhaps the truth is simpler than that. Perhaps the kiss wasn't about the kiss at all. Perhaps it was about two broken people finding wholeness in each other, even if only for a moment. Perhaps it was about choosing connection over isolation, hope over despair, love over fear, and perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's everything. The sun sets over Redemption Creek, as it has every day since Jake Morrison died for love. The shadows grow long, the air turns cool, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howls its lonely song. But in the cemetery, under the cottonwood tree, there is no loneliness. There is only peace and the eternal presence of a love that proved stronger than death. This is their story. This was their choice, and in the end it was worth it. It's always worth it. So I ask you again, the question that started this tale. Would you die for a kiss? Would you trade every tomorrow for one perfect moment with the person you love? Jake Morrison did, and his name lives on. Isabella Rose lived for that love, and her life touched hundreds of others. What will you choose when your moment comes? Will you be brave enough to love without reservation, without guarantee, without safety net? Will you dare to be an outlaw in the territory of the heart, where the only law is the one you make with another soul? The choice, as always, is yours. But remember, in this life, we don't get many chances at perfect moments. When one comes, wearing a blue dress and offering salvation, or standing in the street ready to face death for strangers, don't let it pass by. Don't let fear win. Choose love, choose bravery, choose the kiss, even if it costs everything. Because in the end, when the last sunset fades and the final story is told, it's not the years in your life that count. It's the life in your years. It's the moments when you chose love over safety, passion over prudence, someone else's happiness over your own survival. Jake Morrison knew this. Isabella Rose learned it. And now, their story is yours to carry forward. Welcome to Outlaw Love. Stories where love breaks all the rules and hearts are the highest stakes of all. If this tale touched your soul, if it made you think about your own choices and chances, then subscribe to hear more stories of forbidden love from the Wild West. Every week, we bring you tales of passion and danger, of hearts that dared to love. Against all odds, leave a comment telling us, what would you risk for true love? What rules would you break? What price would you pay? And remember, in the territory of the heart, we're all outlaws. We're all just trying to find that one person worth dying for, that one kiss worth everything. Until next time, keep your heart loaded and your courage ready. Because in this life, you never know when love will call you out for a showdown at high noon. This is Outlaw Love Stories, where every tale ends with a choice. Safety or passion, existence or life, fear or love. Choose. Wesley, choose bravely, choose love, always choose love.